everyone, welcome back. Today we're taking a deep dive into something you've definitely heard a lot about. Green jobs.
Yeah, it seems like everyone's talking about green jobs these days.
For good reason too, right? I mean, renewable energy, it's booming. We're seeing jobs in that sector growing like 3 times faster than those old fossil fuel jobs.
It's true. The growth is pretty remarkable. But, and this is a big but, we need to look beyond just those flashy headlines.
Okay, so what's the catch?
Well, the catch is that all this growth, it isn't benefiting everyone equally.
You're right. A report from the International Renewable Energy Agency actually found that a whopping 80% of wind and solar jobs, they're concentrated in wealthier nations.
Yeah, and that leaves, well, who does that leave behind?
That leaves communities of color, and of course the global south, they're falling behind in this whole green job boom.
It's a real problem. And it's not just about the numbers either.
Oh, there are some big numbers though, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The International Labor Organization, the ILO, they're predicting something like 24 million new green jobs by 2030.
Wow, that's huge.
It is, but there's a big if attached to that prediction.
What's that?
They very clearly state that these jobs will only materialize if the transition is just commuting.
So is that what we're really talking about today? Can the green economy actually lift everyone up, or is it going to, well, deepen those divides that we already see?
That's the million-dollar question. And to really wrap our heads around it, I want you to picture this. Imagine a split screen.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
On one side, you have this state-of-the-art wind turbine factory. Let's say it's in Germany. The workers there are unionized. They're earning living wages, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, I got that side. Now what's on the other side of the screen?
On the other side, we see a completely different reality. We see Congolese miners, and many of them are children, extracting cobalt in really dangerous conditions.
And that cobalt, that's going to end up in those wind turbines in Germany, right?
Exactly. It's a powerful reminder that the clean energy future, it relies on materials that come at a huge human cost.
It's kind of a paradox, isn't it? But hey, let's not get too bogged down in the negativity, right? There are some bright spots out there.
Oh, yeah, definitely. What are you thinking of?
Well, there's the Kayenta Solar Project on the Navajo Nation.
Oh, that's a great one.
They've built this amazing solar project on reclaimed coal land. Think about it. It's providing clean energy for something like 18,000 homes, and it's creating jobs for the local community.
It really shows what's possible, doesn't it? The Kayenta project, it's about more than just swapping out dirty fossil fuels for clean renewables.
So what is it about then?
It's about making sure that the benefits, they reach the people who've been most impacted by that dirty energy economy.
It's about justice, right?
Exactly. Climate justice.
But honestly, stories like this, are they still too rare?
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, a study by the Brookings Institution, it found that only about 10% of clean energy jobs in the U.S. go to Black or Indigenous workers.
That's a pretty stark reminder that we have a long way to go.
And, it's not just about jobs, is it?
What else is it about?
It's about addressing those systemic issues of injustice that have been plaguing these communities for generations.
That reminds me of something climate justice lawyer Colette Pichon-Battle said.
Oh, yeah? What was that?
She said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that a just transition, it isn't just about swapping out oil drills for wind turbines.
It's much bigger than that, right?
Yeah, she said it's about reparations, it's about empowering those frontline communities.
Those who've borne the brunt of pollution and environmental devastation.
Exactly. She's saying they should be leading the transition, not just offered some, entry-level job in it.
It's a really powerful message.
It is, and it highlights something we need to be careful of. We can't just slap a green label on something and assume it's automatically good for everyone.
Oh, 100%. I mean, look at some of those so-called clean technologies.
What do you mean?
Well, think back to those Congolese miners we talked about.
Yeah.
It's estimated that 40,000 children are working in those cobalt mines.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was that many.
It's heartbreaking. And it's not just cobalt either.
You're talking about lithium too, right?
Exactly. Lithium, another crucial component of batteries, well, it's having a devastating impact on indigenous water supplies in places like Chile.
So what we're seeing is that this clean energy transition, in some ways, it's replicating the extractive practices of the fossil fuel industry, just with different resources.
It's a disturbing trend.
You can't help but see the echoes of colonialism here.
What do you mean?
Extracting resources, exploiting labor in the global south to fuel the global north. I mean, That's a pattern we've seen for
It's
centuries.
almost like the Green Revolution is perpetuating those same patterns.
That's why this call for a just transition is so important.
Why is that?
Because it's about fundamentally shifting those power dynamics.
Breaking free from that colonial legacy.
Right, yeah. It's about making sure that the transition to a green future doesn't just repeat the injustices of the past.
But instead creates a more equitable and sustainable world for all.
So we've talked about the global landscape. We've talked about reparations and the hidden costs of some of these clean technologies. But let's zoom in on a specific example.
Okay, which one are you thinking of?
Well, South Africa has implemented this $10 billion green energy plan,
Yeah, it's created quite a few jobs.
but there's a twist.
Jobs for whom? That's the real question, isn't it?
Exactly. It turns out a lot of those jobs, they've gone to foreign engineers.
So not so much for the local communities then.
Not really. And in the Eastern Cape, you see this really strange juxtaposition. There's this big wind farm powering luxury homes, but the towns right next door, they're still relying on that dirty coal for their energy.
Wow, so even with a well-intentioned green initiative, you can still end up reinforcing existing inequalities.
It's a classic example of greenwashing, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. You see a wind farm and you think, great, green energy. But are the local communities benefiting? That's the question we need to be asking.
So this brings us to the importance of worker-led transitions, right?
Absolutely. We need to hear from the people on the ground, the people who are directly impacted by these changes.
People like Luis.
Who's Luis?
He's a former oil rig worker who was able to successfully transition to offshore wind.
How did he manage that?
Well, it was thanks to union-led retraining programs.
Ah, so his union really fought for him.
Yeah, they fought for him to have priority access to those new opportunities in the wind industry.
You know, Luis's story is a testament to the power of collective action. But sadly, that's not the reality for most workers in the renewable energy sector.
Yeah, you're right. Globally, only about 12% of renewable energy jobs are unionized. That's according to the International Trade Union Confederation.
Which means that a lot of those workers are left vulnerable without the benefits and protections that come with being in a union.
And that lack of equity, well, it has consequences.
Big consequences. The UN has actually warned that failing to address these inequalities, it could actually lead to social unrest.
Social unrest. How so?
Well, it could lead to pushback against climate action. Think about the Yellow Vest protests in France.
Oh, yeah, that was a few years ago, right?
Yeah, those protests erupted in response to fuel taxes.
But weren't those fuel taxes meant to reduce emissions?
They were, but they hit rural communities the hardest.
And those communities were already struggling, right?
Yeah, they were struggling economically, and so those fuel taxes, they were seen as just another burden.
Another burden placed on them by an out-of-touch elite?
Exactly. The Yellow Vest protests are a stark warning
Altering about what?
that climate policies, if they ignore the needs of the most vulnerable people, they can backfire big time.
So we need to move beyond those Band-Aid solutions.
And embrace a truly just transition.
One that puts people and equity at the center.
Absolutely. So where do we go from here? Well, there are some inspiring examples of communities and organizations and policies that are leading the way, showing us that a just and equitable green economy, it's not just a pipe dream. It's possible.
And that's what we'll dive into next time.
Looking forward to it.
So we've talked about all the potential pitfalls, but are there any success stories out there? What does a just green transition actually look like?
Oh, there are absolutely success stories. Incredible examples of communities and organizations doing it right. Proof that a just transition isn't just some, far-off dream. It's happening right now.
That's what I like to hear. So tell me more. What are some examples?
Well, let's start with something you might not expect. Have you heard of Grameen Shakti?
That doesn't ring a bell.
It's this incredible organization in Bangladesh.
Okay, I'm listening.
They've trained over 50,000 women, get this, as solar technicians.
Wow, 50,000. That's amazing. What kind of impact are they having?
I mean, just think about that for a second.
Yeah.
These women are bringing electricity to millions of homes in Bangladesh. And at the same time, they're breaking down gender barriers.
It's like a double win.
Exactly. Grameen Shakti is a perfect example of how empowering marginalized communities can lead to both social and environmental progress.
So it's not just about, like, checking a box, right?
No, not at all. Equity, it isn't an afterthought. It's not like you figure out the technical stuff first and then worry about who benefits. It has to be the driving force.
The engine of the whole thing.
Exactly.
Are there other examples?
Oh, there are tons. We're seeing some really promising things happening on the policy front, too.
Like what?
Well, take New York's Climate Jobs NY program, for example.
Okay, tell me about that one.
It's not just about creating any old green jobs.
What's the difference?
It's about making sure those jobs are good jobs, union jobs.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, in New York, if you're working on a renewable energy project that's funded by the state, you're guaranteed a union job, which means you get a living wage, benefits, and you have a voice in the workplace.
It sounds like they're really trying to make sure that workers aren't left behind in this transition.
That's the idea. And across the pond, the EU's Green New Deal, that's another bright spot.
I've heard a bit about that, but what's the EU doing specifically?
They're putting some serious money behind it, providing funding to help those coal regions transition to a clean energy economy.
That makes sense. Those are the areas that are going to be most impacted by the shift away from fossil fuels.
Exactly. And a key focus is retraining workers, making sure they have the skills they need for those new green jobs.
So we're actually seeing a shift from just talking about a just transition to actually putting policies in place that support it.
It's happening. These initiatives show us that it's possible, that we can create policies that actually prioritize both environmental sustainability and social justice.
And that's a really powerful message, isn't it? That we don't have to choose between protecting the planet and protecting people.
We can do both.
Yeah.
The key now is to scale these solutions up and to implement them, really commit to them.
It's about moving from those pilot projects to widespread systemic change.
Exactly. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about those amazing possibilities of the green economy, but also those harsh realities of inequality and, in some cases, straight-up exploitation. Before we go, I think it's important to take a step back. Look at the big picture.
What do you mean?
Well, climate activist Rihanna Gunright, she was one of the architects of the Green New Deal in the U.S., she said something that's really stuck with me.
Oh, what was that?
She said, "We can't save the planet on the backs of the poor."
That's a really powerful statement.
It is, isn't it? It reminds us that this can't just be about swapping out fossil fuels for renewables. It has to be about creating a more just and equitable world.
So a just transition, it demands a much more holistic approach.
It does.
Yeah.
And it has to go beyond just those jobs in the renewable energy sector.
So what else needs to be part of the equation?
We need to be thinking about things like green housing, affordable public transit, access to health care. All of these things are intertwined with renewable energy projects.
They're all part of the bigger picture.
And we can't ignore the human cost of climate change.
We can't just focus on reducing emissions and forget about the people who are already bearing the brunt of the climate crisis.
Exactly. It's time to demand a future where climate solutions prioritize both people and the planet, where everyone benefits from the transition to a green economy.
All right, so we've laid out the challenges, we've highlighted some solutions. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder.
Okay, what's the question?
What does green really mean if it comes at the expense of human dignity and well-being? What do you think?
That's a great question. I think it really forces us to think critically about what kind of future we're building. As you continue to learn about green jobs and engage with the green economy, remember that real progress, it isn't just about technological advancements. It's about creating a world that's just and equitable for everyone.
This deep dive into green jobs, it's been pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more nuanced than I think most people realize.
We've seen, the incredible potential, but also those really alarming disparities.
And we've seen some inspiring examples of how it can be done right.
It seems like what's really become clear is that this transition, it's not just about swapping out fossil fuels for renewable energy.
It's way bigger than that, isn't it?
It feels like it's about a fundamental shift, in our values.
How we value people, how we value the planet.
Exactly. We can't achieve a true...
Make sure they're creating policies that prioritize both people and the planet.
And remember, this isn't just about saving the environment. It's about creating a better, fairer world.
A world where everyone, and I mean everyone, has access to clean energy, good jobs, a healthy future.
That's what we should all be striving for. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of green jobs.
It's a complex issue, but we hope this has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to get involved.
Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a better world for all of us.